Hey everyone, it's Ryu here. It's almost my bedtime. I got my stuffed animal here, woof woof. So I figured what better way to wind up a long day at work than give you all a deck tech of probably one of my favorite decks historically. This is my modern burn deck. I've actually used this deck before in gameplay, which you can see in the description below. And I figured it would be nice to show you what I use and see how it's different from other decks used in Modern today. So you might be wondering why on earth I love Burn so much. Burn was one of the first decks I ever played in constructed events, and back then it would have been called 1.5, but 1.5 back then was basically the legacy of today. The deck has changed quite a bit since then. I only run red-green because I'm an old fart, but I love this list, and I think it has a lot of cool stuff just because I run a lot of one-ofs, as you see here, but we'll get into that in a moment. But I'm going to go over this list. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth should I play Burn? Why on earth do what I want to play this list? First things first, Burn is kind of an uncommon archetype, you could say. Also, it's fun and fast, and it's easy to pick up. Games with Burn are usually pretty fast. You don't have to think too hard. You do have to think, but probably not as hard as you would play like a combo or a control deck. Simply, deck works a lot like a jackhammer. You just basically have to just keep going and going and going. So it's a wonderful deck for a new player or someone who's new to a more advanced format like Modern. Like I say, I've been playing a deck like this for a very long time, since the beginning of the last decade. So a lot has changed since those days. So let's get started with the creatures. Now, the purpose of any burn deck is you want to try to win as fast as possible. This is why we need very aggressive creatures to get us kick-started. The main goal when you draw your opening hand is you want to get a one-drop creature. It really helps out because you really want your creatures to do the work. And the faster the creature and more powerful the creature is, the better. That's why we run a lot of little hasty creatures. Starting off on the left, we have Goblin Guide here. This is arguably one of the best aggressive creatures in the format, considering it is a 2-power creature with haste for 1 mana. It also has some additional text that says that whenever it attacks, you have to reveal the top card of your opponent's library, and your opponent gets to draw it if it's a land card. Personally, this is not that big of a drawback, especially when you're doing so much damage, and even if they don't get to draw a land, you still get to see what cards are in their deck, and therefore it gives you a bit of an advantage as to what you are playing up against. Over on our right here is Monastery Swiftspear. This is a pretty awesome addition to the deck. I was quite stoked for this creature when it came out. This is arguably a Goblin Guide with no drawbacks. It is true that it only has 1 power on turn 1 if you drop it, but considering we run quite a few instants and sorceries, it rarely stays at 1 power. In short, it's quite deceptively powerful, especially if you have a hand chock full of burn. Like Goblin Guide, we want to see this turn 1 because, considering it has prowess, it can usually do up to 3 damage a turn, and that's pretty ridiculous in addition to all the burn spells that we run. Finally, we have our last haste creature for 1 mana, and he's our newest addition, the Village Messenger. As you see here, I have his backside turnover. If you don't remember, he transforms into the Moonrise Intruder, which is a 2-2 with Menace. So since he's still in play when he transforms, you'll still be able to attack with him. Personally, he's really good against decks that don't have a play turn 1 because he'll flip over and he'll have Menace. The thing you may want to be a little bit cautious about is, considering you run a lot of 1 mana spells, you are very likely going to flip him back over, and you may want to be a little bit careful about that and maybe hold off if you have a lightning bolt or something till the end of your opponent's turn, so that way he'll stay on his wolf side a bit longer than usual. Still, he's been working very well for me, and I think people will be surprised to see how powerful this thing is. Down on the bottom here, you could say I have some Miser one-ofs. It's not really a Miser, but still, they're just one-ofs. I'm running the classic Grim Lavamancer. This is the Grim Lavamancer I used when I first started playing this deck back in 2002. The reason I only run 1 is you don't always have enough resources in your graveyard to power 2 of them, so I just run 1, and it's nice because you can do direct damage or take out small creatures, and it's good because you're going to need to do as much damage as possible. On our right here, we have the one of Vexing Devil. Some people say you should run 4 of these. I'm kind of opposed to that, simply because there's a lot of cards in Modern that deal with Vexing Devil outright. He can just get lightning bolted, and therefore you'll just end up with nothing. Next up, I'm trying a Zurgo Bellstriker as my, I guess you could say, my pseudo one-drop haste creature. He's actually doing okay. I don't draw him very often, but it's just a nice extra aggressive creature. Dash can be nifty if you know you're going up against decks that are using things like Pyroclasm or Supreme Verdict. It's a sweet card. And like Village Messenger, I think it has a lot of potential, and it's been doing well for me. Now, if you're on a budget and you can't afford Goblin Guides, which are $40 a piece, woof. You can try something else like Legion Loyalist if you need another hasty creature. Or like I say, you can run a full set of Vexing Devils and one of something else. What it is depends on you. Fun fact, back in the day I used to run Aki Avalanchers, which is a 1/1 Goblin Warrior for a red mana, and it has Sacrifice a Land. Aki Avalanchers gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and you can only use this ability once a turn. But considering times have really changed, he sadly doesn't see any play anymore. He's very sad. Next up, we have the cards that the deck is named after, the burn spells. Starting off, we have the ever so classic Lightning Bolt. As you can tell, these are really old Lightning Bolts that I've had since I was very young, and yes, these have been in the deck ever since 2002. It's pretty much the only card in the deck, aside from Grim Lavamancer, that has been in the deck ever since its creation. Moving on, we have Lava Spike, which is essentially a Lightning Bolt that only targets players, and it's an arcane sorcery, but that is never relevant. But still, it does 3 damage for 1 mana, and that's exactly what we want. Next up, we have Rift Bolt, which is arguably the worst burn spell in the deck, simply because you have to suspend it, and it's really bad against things like Remand, because they can just remand it after you suspend it. But still, it does what we want it to do, and you can cast it for 3 mana, which, oddly enough, happens more often than you think. For wacky purposes, we're running a 1 of collateral damage, just as an additional 3 damage for 1 mana burn spell. Oddly enough, this card is actually not as bad as people think it is. I do not recommend running a full set of it, though. It's kind of it takes a lot of requirements, and you won't always have a creature if you run 4, but usually more often than not, you will have a creature with just 1 copy. And it's not as bad as people make it out to be. You might think I'm strange for running it, but it does work. Next up, we have what you could consider the anti-life gaining package, which consists of all 2 mana spells. First up, we have Skullcrack, which everyone says you should never play in your main deck, but I think some people really have never lost to a life-gaining deck, or any deck that gains life, and in Modern there's quite a few of them that run things like Kitchen Finks, Obstinate Baloth, Siege Rhino, all that stuff, and Skullcrack works wonders against them. Another thing a lot of people don't realize is Skullcrack actually bypasses protection from colors. The thing is, you just have to use it when they block, and then protection wears off, and a lot of people don't realize that. But still, Skullcrack's a wonderful card. Some people don't like to play it in the main deck just because it doesn't target creatures, but when you know that you're going to lose to life gain, and life gain does play a really big factor in this matchup, having a set in the main is just wondrous. Some people might be saying I'm going overboard, running a full set of Skullcrack and a Tarkus Command to prevent life gain, but come on, a Tarkus Command just does everything. I mean, it does damage, prevents your opponent from gaining life, and pumps all your creatures, and considering I run quite a few creatures, that pump is pretty beneficial for me. This card just works wonders, and I think Burn players have wanted a card like it for just a really long time. Now, you might be wondering why I have this set of Ash Zealots here, and why I'm not running something like Eidolon of the Great Revel. Well, the truth is I actually do run Eidolon of the Great Revel, I just don't have them with me at the moment. Someone I know is borrowing them. But believe it or not, if I did not have the budget for Eidolon of the Great Revels, I would run Ash Zealot, and I don't think Ash Zealot is a very bad card in this deck. It's actually quite awesome, actually. It allows you to keep attacking through your opponent's line of small creatures, and it's also really good against Lingering Souls and Snapcaster Mage. So if you love putting on pressure, Ash Zealot is a wonderful card. Eidolon is a bit better just because it deals with things like Storm Combo, and it does prevent Kitchen Finks from giving your opponent life when it enters the battlefield. But still, it's a really good card, and if you are on a budget, Ash Zealot is a great, great replacement for Eidolon. If you don't want to run Ash Zealot, another good replacement is Keldon Marauders. This is a 3/3 with Vanishing 2, which means it only stays in play for 2 turns before it fades away. But it deals 1 damage upon entering and leaving the battlefield, so it's a good way to kind of get some range in on your opponent. Next we have the mana base, which consists of 10 mountains. No. Next we have the mana base, which consists of 10 mountains, 4 Stomping Ground, and 7 fetches. You might be wondering why not 8 or more fetches. I guess it's just how I roll. I think it's enough to get the land you need out of your deck and get you drawing the big beefy burn spells, although they're not really beefy. They all cost 1 mana. Another land you can run is the, what's it called? The red-green land from Scars of Mirrodin, Copperline Gorge, that's the one. But personally, I'm not too big a fan of that, but some people love that land, and it's not a terrible land. I just like to go with Stomping Ground just because I can control when it comes into play, tapped or untapped. And my Wooded Foothills and Scalding Tarns can fetch for it. This is the sideboard here, and it's got a lot of stuff that's good against various things. For knowing artifacts and enchantments like Leyline of Sanctity and Ensnaring Bridge, we have Destructive Revelry, which is arguably probably one of the best enchantment removal spells ever. It's been one of Red's drawbacks to not be able to get rid of enchantments, and Destructive Revelry really fixes that by splicing green, and it's stellar, just wonderful. Red had such a hard time in the day getting rid of things like Ivory Mask and Leyline of Sanctity, but now with cards like Destructive Revelry, you don't have to worry about that anymore, or as much, or you shouldn't worry about it as much. To deal with little creatures, we have a Searing Blaze or Searing Blood. I have Searing Blaze out here, but I actually have been using Searing Blood more. Searing Blaze is arguably better if you run fetches, but if you don't run fetches, Searing Blood is probably going to be the bit better of the choice, simply because it's not fetch dependent, and it always does 3 damage no matter what, if it kills the creature, that is. But if you know you run fetches like I do, Searing Blaze is arguably a little bit better, although there aren't always going to be decks in the metagame full of 3 toughness creatures, so Searing Blood may be the better option no matter what. Searing Blaze, I know, does do more damage to the creature. Over here, I have Roast. Some people in this slot like to run things like Combust or Rending Volley. I like Roast just because it hits a lot of things, and it kills Siege Rhinos. Roast often takes out a Tarmogoyf early game, and that's pretty stellar. And finally, against control decks, I run Exquisite Firecraft just to get that final punch in there, hopefully. Considering all control decks like to run counter spells, Exquisite Firecraft is just stellar, and you'll always get it in unless they have something like Mindbreak Trap or something. But that's very unlikely, and it's stellar. I love it. Other good sideboard options include Molten Rain or some other form of land destruction like Blood Moon. You can also run things like Leyline of Punishment, which I don't seem to have any of, which is nice if you don't like to run a whole bunch of Skullcracks or Tarkus commands. But like I say, the deck is very flexible. There's a lot of great options in it. For Pete's sake, you could run like Spark Elemental in this deck, and Spark Elemental's not that great. It's like Lightning Bolt that can be blocked. So that was the deck tech for Mono Red Burn. I hope it has been of some help to you to introduce you to the deck and know how it works and what it likes to do and all the things you can do to customize it and making it a deck of your own. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, or suggestions, or you can tell me that Ash Zealot is not viable in Modern. Thank you again so much for watching. My name is Rio Spectre, and I will see you all next time. And now it's bedtime. Woof.